Today, in current events from a Christian perspective, while many outlets are still pushing Pride Month shenanigans, there is much less than there was a few years ago. So, happy June. We do still have some outlets that are egregiously pushing the sexual identity on children. We'll look at a couple of those, and all of those should be outlawed entirely. But we also have entire state governments pushing back and renaming Pride Month into much more wholesome ideas. We'll look at all of this and more today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Hey everybody, welcome to Church Public. Really glad you stopped by today. If this is your first time, welcome. If you've been here for several years at this point, I really appreciate you. If you haven't already, do all the things, press all the buttons like subscribe and share. And if you want, you can go to churchpublic.com/support. You can also go to the new Substack and you can subscribe there. I still have free subscriptions open, which is totally fine. And if you want to subscribe as a paid subscriber, that's fine too. We look at current events from a Christian perspective to help you live out your faith because, my goodness, we need a lot of faith these days. And I would argue, we need the faith in Jesus. That's really the only thing that is going to save us from all of the wacky craziness that's going on. So those are the things that we look at. We look at current events from a Christian perspective so that we can see when these events happen, what does it mean to actually live out your faith? And that's really the most important thing. So we need to do that. We need to do that to the best of our ability. And hopefully this is helpful to you as we go through. So we'll look at some things. We'll obviously connect Bible to all of the things that it makes sense to. I would say the Bible connects to everything, but we really want to make sure that we're doing well as we go through this together. So unfortunately, perhaps one of the most, I think, disgusting things that I saw from this Pride Month 2026 was from the supposedly wholesome kids entertainment show, Sesame Street. You know, Sesame Street, where they have puppets and they do fun and childish things for children on the PBS, the public broadcasting system. Well, they posted this Happy Pride Month from Sesame Street. Join us in celebrating and uplifting the LGBTQIA plus members of our community and the rainbow. And you'll see, if you're just listening, you might not see, so you can go to the video on Substack, on YouTube, on churchpublic.com, on Rumble, probably on a bunch of different places, and then audio is fine too, but we'll be looking at some things if you want to see some things. So if you're just listening, I will describe for you what you're seeing is apparently all of the fur of all of the different characters lined up in a rainbow. And I guess this fur rainbow is to highlight the LGBTQAI hashtag plus squiggly emoji $sign ideologies. And I hate to say this. I really hate to say this, but this is a show for kids. And remember, every one of these, including the plus sign, every one of these letters has to do with a sexual attraction. And this is a kids show. We should be outraged by this. This is just ridiculous at this point. And there are people who are arguing that this is wholesome children's entertainment, where they're pushing these sexual ideologies. So this is just terrible. The only good news here really is that the Trump administration last year in 2025 defunded PBS. And of course, you could hear the gnashing and wailing of the godless liberals when that happened, which is just wonderful to hear at this point. And somehow Trump was proven right once again. Okay, so let's keep going. I don't want to talk about that one anymore because there's better news. The better news is there's a bunch of states that have rebranded the month of June from Pride to something much more wholesome, which is super cool. Republican governors across the United States are offering biblically framed alternatives to the June LGBTQ hashtag emoji Pride Month celebrations and celebrating in some God's design for families, which is super cool. Red states are using the opportunity to promote a variety of messages like protecting unborn life or the nuclear family. Oklahoma, I think I have that one here. Governor Kevin Stitt posted on social media, God authors every life as image bearers. There is inherent dignity and value in every human life. That's why Oklahoma is proud to declare June as Life Month. That's wonderful. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee rebranded June as Nuclear Family Month. Man, there was a lot of hate on this one on the socials. Celebrating God's family structure of, quote, one husband, one wife, and any biological or adopted or fostered children, end quote. That's wonderful. There were a couple of clips here I don't have, but Indiana Governor Mike Braun echoed that effort, Nuclear Family Month for his state. He said, quote, "As we approach America's 250th anniversary, this proclamation recognizes the important role families play in shaping the future of our state and country." Alabama's Governor Kay Ivey said the father of the structure are the, quote, "head of household, and homes led by a father and mother provide children with the structure and discipline necessary to succeed through life," end quote. So this is wonderful. She says to coincide with Father's Day, the Alabama governor is celebrating Strong Families Month. So family, nuclear family, strong families, and this is wonderful. And this is creation order, and it's God's family structure, a man, a woman, a baby. Like that is the smallest group of civilization, and it is a biblical group, and it is a group for flourishing, and that is wonderful, and I love that, and I love seeing that. Utah, Arkansas, some other GOP-controlled states also supported June as Fidelity Month. So I love this. This is wonderful. I want to see more of this. It's just really good to see states pushing back and using the political power, the legal power, to say no to the shenanigans that this just godless pagan culture continues to push. So I think that's a win. I think it's wonderful. I still have seen a bunch of pride stuff online. I'm not going to share any of that. We all know what it is. We all know what it looks like. I think the thing to remember is when you see it, you can identify it. And if you notice it and it's something that you see as wrong, you can identify that it is against Christianity. It's against the biblical mandate. It's against creation order. But we also have to remember that there are people involved in this, and we do want to love people, and we want to love people to Jesus, and we want to show them the better way. So we're not hating anybody. We're not condemning anybody per se. We're just saying, hey, there's a better way. The better way is Jesus, and the better way is the way that God has set in order for us to do. And we want to make sure we're sharing the love through this season, even though if you stand up and say something, though there's a lot of momentum moving in this direction, you're still going to get pushback. You're still going to get called all the names, the isms, the phobias, all of those things. And you have to be strong in that and be courageous in that and know that people hated Jesus, and they're going to hate you too if you stand up for true things. But it's still important for us to do. Okay, speaking of rebranding, this is a kind of interesting one. The U.S. military has removed tons of pagan idols from the military program and the chaplain program. So this is super cool. This has got some crazy mixed reviews. In fact, there's a war going on the social media right now on whether Mormonism is Christian. I'm not going to speak much of that today because I don't feel like I have to. I can. I mean, drop some comments in if you want me to. I can do a long expose on why the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints is not Christian. We can do that. I'm just going to suffice to say that Mormons are not Christian. If you even reversed it and said, well, does that make all Christians Mormon? I can almost guarantee every person would say no, which means like then it's not. But anyway, I'll do a long expose on that later. If you tell me you want me to do that, I'm happy to do that. Believe it or not, I just got another. I'm looking behind me on my shelf. I just got another Book of Mormon. It's back there somewhere. So I've been doing more looking into this, and I mean, it's obviously true that Mormonism is not Christianity, but that's a fight that's going on social media right now. Why is it going on right now? It's going on right now because the military has removed tons of pagan idols and pagan idolatrous religions from the program. I think around 180. I'm going to read here. Department of War recently dropped about 180 belief systems from its list of recognized religions for U.S. military personnel. This is a great win for Christianity. Now, there's still, I believe, 31 left. There were 211 before, and then there's 31 according to military.com. This is good. It's a start. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you likely know that the only one and true God is the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God whose son is Jesus. But a lot of people don't believe that, and I understand that they don't believe it. And our job is to lovingly share the gospel with them. So that's part of what we do on this program as well. So that has been trimmed from 211 quote unquote faith systems to 31. The move intends to, quote, streamline the Department of War DOW collection of religious preferences for service members to enhance the delivery of targeted religious support from the chaplaincy, end quote. I mean, can you imagine? And I this probably only happens to me because of my ministry background, but probably weekly. This is no joke. Weekly, I receive from one of the online job boards, no interest in me. I've not reached out ever in my life for this, but probably weekly, I receive from them an offer to become a chaplain. And I don't want to, but also I can't imagine. Like, can you imagine trying to be a chaplain? Like for me personally, like here's an anecdote, like me personally being a chaplain and trying to manage 211 faiths while being a chaplain. And that's why I've always said, like, no, I believe in Jesus and that's the only thing I'm going to talk about. So I'm sorry. like Jesus is the only way to God and for eternal salvation. So that's all I can say. Okay. So, is there anything else we need to talk about this? Yeah, a little bit more. Some of the belief systems that were removed are things like atheism, which by definition is not a religion because they don't believe in a God. That's a side, like, theological philosophical idea. But anyway, so no religion or agnostic, pagan deities, earth-based faiths like Wicca, Druidism, heathenism, the Troth, New Age beliefs such as Ekanar, Rosicrucianism. I'm not going to read all these. You get the idea. Basically, pagan religions, magic religions, worshiping like earth deities and creation deities. Those are all out, which is good because paganism was removed 1,000+ years ago. I mean, think about the conquest. Or the introduction is a better way to say it, of Christianity into the Vikings, into other places where the Vikings had so many deities. Think of the Romans. Think of the Greeks. Go back even farther. Like we've done this already, and yet we're still dealing with it because. And the answer is simple, and I won't go too far into this right now, but the answer is simple. Like, we are a religious people. You can argue that. The agnostics, the atheists would obviously argue that, but I would argue that their religion is science. Their religion is something material or something like that. But we all have a religion. We just do. And the reality is, for those that are not in Christ, you're going to war against God. Read Romans about that. Romans 1, Romans 2, and many other parts of the New Testament and Old at that point, where in our hearts, we rebel against God. So it makes sense that there's going to be all these other religions. Of course, there always have been. And you're going to rebel against the one true God unless you believe in him and call on his name. Okay, so this directive came from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who pledged last year to overhaul the military's chaplain corps by refocusing on religious ministry, and eliminating secular influences. So I think that's good. I would say we still need to do some things. Hegseth has been working to remove some of the secular and DEI and woke stuff, and that's good. And I hope he continues to do so. And I think we need to continue to move down that direction. Okay, let's keep going. In separation of church and state news, this one's interesting / funny. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, recently, quote unquote, preached at Raphael Warnock's church. Wait, isn't that separation of church and state? Like, shouldn't she not be doing this? It's so hard to keep track of all these things. So in a clip posted to Facebook, which at this point I'm not going to play, you could go watch it if you want. I don't recommend it, not for any particular reason, but because it's silliness. I'll give you a couple of quotes as we go through. But she visited this Ebenezer Baptist Church in Georgia and was invited to the pulpit on Mother's Day. And she gave a quote unquote speech. And most of it was about redistricting and ICE and some other things. Do I want to read some of these? quotes. I mean, not really. Like, she talks about redistricting and she talks about other things. Here's what I want to point out. We are told as evangelicals constantly that you are not allowed to talk about politics from the pulpit because of some quote unquote separation of church and state, which, again, this was a letter to the Danbury Baptists, and it was to make sure that we knew as believers the federal government was not going to interfere in the state government or individual churches. That was really it. But of course, it's been weaponized into so much more. But that's a long story. I've covered that on this podcast multiple times at this point. But I think it is interesting. And the reason I point this out here is AOC is using the venue of a Christian church to quote unquote preach about intentionally segregating people based on skin color because of this redistricting. And she's giving certain members of a community certain voting privileges and excluding other members. So all of this is highly anti-Christian, and to her logic, to the left's logic, this is also a violation of the separation of church and state. So they like to have it both ways. Of course, they have it both ways. There's no way around that. And ultimately, like, the Lord detests unequal weights and measures. We know that, Proverbs 20:23. This party is very angry when conservative Christians talk about politics in the church, but apparently it's perfectly fine. And in fact, I would argue, or they would likely argue, it's a moral good when they do the same. So I'm not worried about it. I just think it's funny, and sometimes I like to point out hypocrisy and things like that. I mean, I think we all see it at this point, but these are the things we have to see and understand and know and go, hey, you told me I can't do that. Why are you doing that? So if you can do it, then I can do it too. Now, I would go foundationally one step lower and say, we have the right to talk about whatever we want in churches. And when churches, when politicians, when government officials enter the theological realm, of which I can make the case for on things like abortion and human rights and other things, we have an obligation as pastors and religious leaders to talk about the things from the church so that we can educate our people and we can understand what to do. I think that's important, and I think it's something that we need to do more of, not, hear me very clearly, not to avoid the preaching of the word, because that is the number one thing that we have to do, and we need to connect the preaching of the word and the things that we learn through the Bible to how we live our life in every message. That's what the whole point of it is. What does the Bible say we need and we believe, and what are we supposed to do with this information? So we have to continue to do that, though I think she and others would likely disagree with us on that. Okay, in some other good news, Trump and the U.S. military has taken some action to help persecuted Christians in Nigeria. I've talked about this many times. Nigeria is just one of those places where Christians are persecuted terribly. I will not show images at this time. There are plenty of images going around the internet of Nigerian Christians being slaughtered by mostly Muslims in those areas. And again, this is a spiritual battle. It's a religious war. And it is a one-sided war. The Christians in this area are not taking up arms against them, but the Trump administration has taken some action to help persecuted Christians in Nigeria. Before I do talk about that a little bit, I do want to play this clip that I recently heard from a Nigerian pastor. He is speaking to a group in the UK at a rally, but he does talk about some of the problems that he encounters as a Nigerian pastor, a Nigerian Christian in Nigeria, working at churches there. So let's hear from him for a moment, and then we'll hear a little bit from Hegseth again and what he did and what the U.S. government did.
For years, protractedly, the church in Nigeria has been under severe persecution. Christians in Nigeria are persecuted in different ways, different dimensions. Communities which are predominantly Christian communities are daily attacked. People killed, churches razed down, and whole communities sacked. That's the situation we live in Nigeria today. So Christian persecution.
So that was really quick. This goes on for a while. I won't play more of it. I've read more about it. I've read some of the stats for the Nigerian church, and I think we're in tens of thousands of Christians who have been killed over the past several years. At this point, it's just a tragedy. It's terrible, and we need to pray for them. And then I love what comes next, where Hegseth. Let me just fix this here. So he posted this about the things that the American government did. He said, last night, U.S. forces, in coordination with the armed forces of Nigeria, killed Abu Bilal al-Minuki and other ISIS leaders. Back in November 2025, President Trump declared to the world that we would help protect Christians in Nigeria, instituted the Department of War to prepare for action. So for months, we hunted this top ISIS leader in Nigeria who was killing Christians, and we killed him and his entire posse. In conjunction with Nigeria's president, at the direction of President Trump, U.S. Africa Command oversaw a precise operation to remove this terrorist. It goes on and on. I'll read this last sentence. This should serve as a reminder that we will hunt down those who wish to harm Americans or innocent Christians wherever they are. So, I mean, this is great. Again, this is using the strength of a nation to help flourishing and to avoid those that would, attack those that cannot care for themselves. And I love this. I think we need to see more of this type of thing. And I think it's just so important to support the Nigerian Christians. We can pray for them and whatever you think we need to do there. So this is good. This is good news. I like this. Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, sometimes I put these stories together and I go, do we really have to go to these? And I guess so. So again, let me just say, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because we need to understand as Christians how to live in this world. And if everyone acted correctly, you wouldn't need me. You wouldn't need any of this. You would just know. But unfortunately, we're humans and we're flawed. And, I'm the worst of those, as Paul would say. And yet we have to lean into this and go, well, let's weigh the circumstances, the events, the news stories on biblical truth, and then decide what's going well and what we may need to address from a biblical and theological perspective. So we have to continue to talk about James Talrico. He is claiming Christianity, and he is speaking about what I would say are not Christian things, not biblical things. And this matters because he's running for office in Texas and will represent the state and its people, but not in a Christian way, because he is not acting in a Christian way. And I do see many other Christians who believe he is a quote-unquote good candidate because he's soft-spoken and he acts quote-unquote nice. But we need to remember that being nice is not a Christian value, and being direct, maybe even being brash, is not a non-Christian value, right? So you can be direct and still be a Christian. You can be nice and not be acting in a Christian way. So we need to remember these things, and we need to weigh people not just on what they say or how they say it, but what they actually do and what they're saying they want to do. So I know that's hard for some people. I know that's hard for people with Trump. I still have a lot of people on my timelines whom I respect and I love, who hate Trump and hate the way he is and hate the way he acts, and have these arguments that he's just anti-Christian and unchristian, so he can't possibly lead the nation. And I continue to say, well, the alternative was, for this last election, people who supported trans things and LGBT things and abortion on demand with no limits at all, and no definition of marriage at all, and persecution of children through these chemical and physical sterilizations and all kinds of other gross things. And Trump has, on the opposite side of things, sometimes he says stupid things. Sometimes he says unbiblical things. Yes. And he puts together prayer meetings and he celebrates America, and he has pastors and people on his staff who are counseling him from a Christian and Jesus specific perspective, which we did not have with the previous administration and absolutely would not have had if the other party had won in the last election. So we're not voting for a pastor. And we need to understand that. So here are some of Talrico's thoughts on God, and then we'll talk about it.
There are so many pathways to the sacred. The Islamic mystic Rumi said, "Every religion has love, but love has no religion." God is so much bigger than our human categories. God is not a Presbyterian. God is not a Christian. God is not a noun at all. God is a verb. God is not a being. God is being itself. God is love. And that's why Jesus is against anything that gets in the way of that love between neighbors, including religion.
Man, and this is why I think it's difficult. Because if you are a less educated Christian, and that's no shade or no shame on anyone, I'm just saying, if you have not read your Bible as much or studied your Bible as much, he's saying some things that are biblical. He's saying some things that are almost even Bible verses. But the way he's saying them and the ideas he's connecting them to are not Christian. They're anti-Christian. And that's what we need to hear and understand. This may be an excellent example to evaluate and remember that and identify what he's saying are not Christian things. So we need, this is why this is so important. This is why this is so dangerous, because he wants to lead state. He wants to lead people. He starts out basically on universalism, that all roads lead to God. Okay, that's not a thing. Well, it's a thing. It's not a Christian thing. He starts out talking about other religions like Hinduism and maybe he talks about Buddhism or something. I mean, he's talking about other religions and other paths to God. But Jesus, John 14:6, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Only through Jesus do you get to God the Father. I mean, like, that's a big deal. If you say that's not true, then you're not being Christian. And then some of those last things, like, it sounds good. He's like, God is not a Presbyterian. True, God is not a Presbyterian. There's Protestants, there's Catholics. I would lean on the Protestant side. I could give you some theological reasons why. I know not everyone agrees with me on that. So God is not a Presbyterian. Sure, great. God is not a Christian. True, because Christian is a name for the people that follow Christ. That sentence logically actually doesn't even make sense. Like, of course, God is not a Christian. But if what you're saying by saying God is not a Christian is saying God is also a Hindu, a Muslim, a Sikh, Zoroastrian, then that's wrong and anti-Christian. So, like, yes, God is not a Christian. But this is a Christian God. So, like, what category are you in? If you're in the category of universalism, which is simply all roads lead to quote unquote God, which I would say is little g God because it's not the God of the Bible, then that's a heresy and you're a heretic if that's what you're saying. So I don't exactly know what he's saying, but what he's saying doesn't sound good. And then the final thing when he's like, God is love, that's true. That's in the Bible. That's one of the one of the first commandments in the 10 Commandments, and it's what Jesus reiterates as the most important commandment. Love the Lord your God with our heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. But you can't throw out the first one to do the second one, which is what he does. He says, nothing should get in the way of loving your neighbor, even the religion. Ugh, sorry. No, that's not biblical. When God says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, that is the first and greatest commandment. So you have to do that. You can't not do that because you want to love somebody. And what do you mean by loving somebody? Oh, you mean allow them to do a transition from man to woman? That's not loving them. Loving people is not lying to them, also in the 10 Commandments. So God is love, but we must love on his terms, not our own terms. So this is where it's wild, and he's wild, and he is, I'll use this word, attractive to many Christians and many conservatives who are tired of Trump. That's why I brought him into this in the beginning, because they're like, Trump is mean and he has mean tweets and he says mean things, but this guy's really nice and he's nice to people. So they're like, oh, he's great. We're gonna vote for him. We cannot get sucked into those lies because he's not better. He's actually worse. He's more sneaky. Now, I want to connect this to the election, to everything that's going on, because I've heard people saying that Ken Paxton, who is running against Talrico, is a quote-unquote bad guy because of his morals and personal life choices. Again, visions of Trump and Trump derangement syndrome here. I once again have to remind you that we're not electing a pastor, but a flawed human being. We have to choose a person who best represents our Christian values, not the person who is the most nice. And I know that's difficult, and I know something inside you is like, yeah, but I don't like him. Okay, fine. You don't have to like him, but what he's going to do, and that's important. Here's my take. And you can agree, you can disagree. You can throw your phone out the window at this point, whatever you'd like to do. I'll just tell you what I believe. I would rather vote for a person who will stand up for my Christian conservative values over a literal heretic that we just heard about, who proclaims a hollowed out, fake and gay version of Christianity. Talrico promotes trans ideology, abortion, immorality in a way that I cannot accept. So try to think through the difference here. One person has made a terrible, personal, moral series of choices. Sure. But one person is advocating ongoing, continuing, and growing in scope terrible policies that affect children and families. This is a huge, stark, enormous difference. Paxton supports secure borders, law enforcement, lower taxes, American energy, Second Amendment. He's pro-family. Talrico supports unlimited abortion, allegedly with no limits at all, transing children, higher taxes, government-run quote-unquote healthcare, and apparently, as we've just seen, has no problem changing the word of God to mean things that it doesn't mean. So it's important. We have to talk about it, as uncomfortable as it may be. Okay, don't get too down or too depressed. We really got to talk about something good here. I keep turning into Paul, my old buddy, in Romans 8, saying we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. So God's will is supreme. You can't mess it up because God uses the good and the bad to make his good. So let's go ahead and look at this. There was a field trip to a mosque or a prayer. Yeah, it was a mosque, the Sterling Mosque. And at some point, all the kids were asked to pray to Allah, and one boy did not. So this is the Beaver Scouts, age 6 to 8. They were taken to Sterling Mosque, and one boy refused to bow. Oh, no, not this picture. This is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Rakshak and Benny, not bowing to the golden idol. But you get the idea. It's the same thing. While others knelt, he stood and went viral for standing his ground. Here's the actual video of that. They're in this mosque. You see all these kids who clearly are not Muslim, and this one kid is like, I'm not going to do that, which is wonderful. We don't know more about this. We don't know why he didn't bow down. My imagination is saying someone counseled this kid to like decide, hey, I'm not going to participate in this because I'm not a Muslim. Like, how weird is this? Let's think about this for a moment. How weird would it be to invite Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists to my Christian church and say, okay, at the end of this, you're going to stand up at the front and proclaim your allegiance to Jesus? Like, I want them to find Jesus, but I wouldn't tell them to do that for no reason. That doesn't make sense. Why would you bow down to another God? Like, there's no reason for this. It doesn't even make sense for him to do this. So I love this. While others knelt, he stood, and he went viral for doing this. This field trip for children aged 6 to 8. It was the Beaver Scouts, part of the Scout movement in the United Kingdom. And even the local Islamic Facebook groups don't deny it happened. So I think this is important. I love to see this. I think we need to do this more. Again, if the roles were reversed, goodness gracious, can you imagine the outrage of a group of... Yeah, I mean, I already painted that picture for you, but you can't imagine, because it could never happen, because, I mean, also Christians would never do that because we want to love people in the kingdom. We're not going to force them into the kingdom. So we need to keep working on this. We need to proclaim the name of Jesus Christ, to preach Christ and Christ crucified, as Paul would say it. That's our number one job, our number one goal. I love helping that in any way that I can. So hopefully this was a help to you as we looked at current events from a Christian perspective. That'll do it for me today. For Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard. Keep the faith. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by today. If this is helpful for you, hit all the buttons, do all the things, hit the notifications, because otherwise, who knows if it even happens. If this is helpful, send it to a friend. If you want to support, go to churchpublic.com/support or go to the Substack. God bless you. Keep the faith.